Hi guys, this is Scarlett from the Clay and Press, and today I am going to show you how to make this anemone flower. We have created a cutter set so that you can make a 4 centimeter anemone, and there's also a cutter set so you can make, it's a tinier, so you can make a 3 centimeter, but I like big flowers, so I'm going to use the larger size for this tutorial. To make these flowers, you're going to need some basic tools, but I'll go through them all. I've got a tissue blade, I've got some scissors, and it's helpful if they're the kind that's pointy on the end. I've got this tool here, but I'm actually not going to be using the end. I'm going to be using the interesting knurling on this tool to create a little bit of texture in the center of the flower. This isn't necessary. You could also just poke the center of the flower with any old tool to create that. I have a ball tool to help me to shape the petals. You're going to need some kind of adhesive if you choose to bake the flower before adding the leaves. That's going to be up to you, but I did end up doing this in 2 bakes, so I used an adhesive. You're going to need your clay. This is a zester. I use it to create sort of a speckly clay look. It's not mandatory at all, but I used it to help create kind of a speckly look in these little stamens around the center of the flower. Oh, well, it's durable. You're also going to need a foam mat or a petal pad, which you will use with the ball tool to help form the petals for the flower. I also should mention that I'm going to be using this type of earring finding. When I purchased these, the loop was actually facing to the side, and I just used some pliers and I twisted the loop. You don't have to use this type of finding. I've actually embedded it between 2 layers of clay so that it's like really stuck in there, but you can put a hole in the leaf, put a hole in the petals. You can use whatever you'd like, but I'm going to be using this kind of long French hook. Also off camera, I have a pasta machine that I'm going to be using to roll my clay around 1 millimeter thick. Some of the clay is going to be even thinner, around 0.7 millimeters thick. If you don't have a pasta machine, then you're going to need some type of depth guide that you can use to roll out your clay to a nice uniform thickness. A lot of people use playing cards for this. That's a really nice option. So I'm just getting all my clay conditioned and ready to go, and I do want to mention something about clay consistency. I am working with clay that is not super sticky and super soft and very stretchy. This clay is on the firmer side, but it's well conditioned, so when you fold it, you don't get any breaking at the fold. But it doesn't hold fingerprints super easily. It's not sticking to my tools. It's firm. When you hold it out to the side, it's not flopping over really easily. If you're working with clay that's really, really soft and sticky, this is going to make everything very difficult for you. I'm going to start out by creating the very center of the flower, and I'm choosing black for these anemones. I build a lot of my 3D flowers on cones like this, so you kind of just build a cone that you can set down, and we're going to build the 3D flower on it. I have an example peony from something I'm working on over here. So it just kind of makes it easy to work on and hold and set down, and then when we're done we'll just cut the flower right off of the cone. So I'm just getting this into kind of a cone, a longish cone shape, and I don't want it to be too pointy. This is one of the cutters that comes in the set, and this circle right here is there to help guide me to get the right size for the very center of the flower. So I want to kind of try to form this into something that will fit through here but not be too much bigger or too much smaller. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just there to kind of help you get the right scale. So we imagined on a 4 centimeter flower, the center would be about the size of this circle. So, you know, I've kind of made it a little bit too small, so I'm just gonna make it a little bit less pointy and stick it in there, and it's not going through the hole too far. That's about where I want to end up. I'm just going to make it a little longer. So I'm starting with a little cone that kind of looks like that. This is where I'm going to use this tool to just gently roll over and create a nice, interesting texture on the tip. It's hard to see because of black clay, but let me find another color. So I've got some purple here just as an example, just so you can kind of see what I mean about creating the texture in the tip. So this is going to show in the very center of the flower when you're done with it. So use any tool you like to just kind of mar up the surface a little and make it kind of bumpy. It's mostly just from the top that you'll see it, but I bring it down the sides a little just in case as well. Now I'm going to make the little stamens, and we're actually going to use this cutter to do that. And I am going to use my zester to make a sort of speckly version of this. Again, this is not necessary. You can just use solid black or solid purple or whatever you would like to create those stamens, but I'm gonna do some speckles. I just have this little lump of black and purple clay, and I'm going to grate it into a bunch of little pieces of clay and just kind of smush them together and make a very thin piece of clay that I can cut the stamen piece out of. This whole thing does not have to be very precise at all. I'm just kind of sticking it together and creating a very speckly little slab of clay. I'm just squishing it together, and I'll run this through my pasta machine. I'm going to use on my Atlas pasta machine, I'm going to use the setting 8, which is actually around 0.7 millimeters thick. I just kind of squished it into a very non-uniform kind of little slab, and I'll run it through my pasta machine. Okay, so this is nice and thin now, and the cutter that I'm going to use on it is this rectangle, and the cutter is also going to create little dot impressions that will help me form this into the stamen pieces. I'm going to cut out 2 because I think I might need to, and you'll see why soon. Okay, so I've got a little rectangle, and again, it's kind of difficult to see because I am using this speckly clay, but there is a bunch of dots going all the way across the little rectangle. I just cut out the same shape in some green so you can actually see what I'm talking about. So this is going to be the stamen, and we're basically going to wrap it around the center. But before we do that, we're going to use these little dots as a guide with our scissors to cut little lines. And I would recommend using, of the 2 sides, this side's a little longer. I would use the shorter side. If you can't get right on the dots, it's really not that big of a deal. They're just there as a bit of a guide to help you kind of get the cuts about the right thickness. And I would definitely recommend using scissors as opposed to laying this down or keeping it on your glass and using something like a blade of any kind. I tried this, but the blades are so thin that when you pick this up, it's actually really common that the little pieces can kind of stay stuck together because the blade is just so thin. Some of them are sticking together, and the scissors have like a really thick blade, so it kind of separates them from each other a little bit better. So you can try different kinds of blades, whatever would work best for you. I just found the scissors to work best for me. So I don't actually need this in green, but I'm just going to take a moment to sort of cut some fringe out of these pieces here. And if you're thinking, Scarlett, why didn't you just make the rectangle cutter so that it cut out these little pieces of fringe? And I would say to you, we tried so hard. We tried. The cutters just didn't work very well. They weren't functional. sometimes we run up against limitations of what we can reasonably cut or create on our 3D printers, and we didn't want to sell something that didn't work very well. So here we are. You get a rectangle with guides, and then you take just a little bit of time to cut a bunch of little tiny lines to make a fringe. Okay, once you've got your fringe cut, you're going to apply it to your little cone, fringe side up. And when I stick it on there, I like to make it so that the fringe is sticking up about the same height as the little tip of the cone. You know what I mean? Like they're about coming to the same line. And you just kind of stick it on there and gently go around. And the reason that I cut out 2 rectangles is because when I made this earring right here, I went all the way around 3 times, and I think that this goes around about 2 times. So if you want to stop there, that's absolutely fine, but I wanted to add a little bit more stamen action to the ones that I made. So you can just stick it on wherever you ended and just go right around one more time. And then wherever you started that, just go over it, and then you can just kind of cut it off. Oh, it was right about there. So now I've got 3 layers of stamen shape, and that's the center of your flower. Okay, now I'm going to cut out the petals. And I have rolled this purple clay to a number 7 on my Atlas pasta machine, and that is right around 1 millimeter thick, just a little thinner than that. The cutters that I'll be using are these right here. There's 3 different sizes. I will probably cut out about 8 of each, and I'll probably use 5 to 8 of each. I think I used 5 of the 2 smaller shapes and maybe 8 of the largest shapes. We'll see. I'm just going to use a tissue blade to move these all over onto my foam pad so that I can shape them a little bit. So this is where you're really going to run into a lot of issues if your clay is too soft. This purple clay is borderline too soft. It's quite sticky. I'm sure if I were to just push this ball tool down on a petal, it would stick to it. So you can prevent a little bit of the sticking by taking some cornstarch. You don't have to put it on your foam pad, but I just kind of put it there so that I can quickly dab and then go back to what I was doing. So I like to shape the petals by first going around the edges to thin them, and then I'll kind of go through and create some line texture. And you want to thin them because if you look at this flower, you can see the petals are, you know, pretty thin, and so we need to kind of take them almost down to about half the thickness, especially on the edges, so that it just looks a little more realistic. This obviously doesn't look like a real flower, but it's close. So I'm gonna zoom in here. So I'll just start on this one because it seems to be in the middle of my screen. And I am using the second largest ball instead of the small one, and I'm just gonna go around the edges. I'm gonna hold it with my finger and kind of pull toward me, going around the edges just to kind of thin the petal out. So you can already see that compared to the one next to it that I haven't done yet, it's a bit thinner. It's starting to look a little wobbly, a little organic. You don't want these to all be identical either, because petals are not identical. So once you've gone around the edges and sort of started to make them a little thinner, then I take the smallest ball tool And I'll go around from the very center and I'll start to kind of press out in a little bit of a kind of a curve out, and that creates some texture on the petal. And as you can see, it also starts to kind of create a cup shape in the petal. You can get creative with this and use an even smaller ball tool if you would like. I don't really know if I have any. I have smaller ball tools, but I never use them because they are so rusted. But if you really want to create more veiny lines, you can do that. But I tend to kind of keep it simple. So I just go around all the edges with one size and just kind of leave that. And I'm going to do the same thing on the largest size and the smallest size petal. Same thing the whole way around. Use the sort of medium-sized ball tool all around the edges, and then the smaller ball tool on the other side to create some texture in the leaves. I messed this one up. I'm just gonna throw it over there. I just watched my own video and I didn't think that it was really obvious what was going on. So I'm gonna zoom in and slow this down and do this again, just to bring a little bit more detail. If you don't want to see this again, just fast forward. So I have the larger of the two ball tools, and I'm just gonna hold it with my finger. I'm gonna put some cornstarch on my finger so that it's not sticking. And I'm just gonna put it down and press and pull out, put it down, press and pull out, all the way around in kind of a fan shape. And if you get like really wibbly wobbly edges, you can just go over it again, because anemones are not very scalloped. So now I've done the edges and I've kind of thinned them out, and you can see kind of where my marks are there, because you can see the shine in the clay where I haven't touched it yet. Then I'm going to use the smaller ball tool, and I'm going to imagine a line in the middle, and I'm just going to draw kind of curvy shapes from this line in the middle. It's hard to slow down. My brain wants to go fast. So now the petal is a little bit, I said cupped earlier, but I think it's more like a taco, more like taco shaped. And you can see the texture in the petal. So hopefully that helps. So I'm going to do that to all of my petals, and then we'll assemble the flower. So this is a situation where I would definitely recommend that you do what I say, not what I do. I made this flower yesterday because I wanted to have something to show off for the beginning of the video. But now I have to try to make another flower on a different day that looks the same. And I don't recommend this. I really do recommend, if you are making a pair of earrings, that you do them both at the same time. If you're making a brooch, I guess that doesn't really matter. If you're working in batches, make them all at the same time. Do the same step one after another, just so they can look relatively uniform, because you just never know what you're gonna end up doing if you try to assemble them the next day. So I'm actually gonna end up putting a ton of petals on this flower. Anemone flowers come in a huge variety of number of petals. Some of them only have 5, some of them have, I think, 18 to 24. And I ended up doing 20 petals on this one. So I have in my hand the smallest of the petals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it right on here, and I'm going to stick 5 going all the way around. I personally think it's a little better if they're not uniformly spaced. So I will take some of them, and you can see these two in the top or the front here are overlapped. I have stared at a lot of anemone flowers, and that ends up looking a little bit more organic. So when you're sticking it on, you want the petal to stick to pretty much everything, but not really the fringe that you've created, because you want the flower to kind of open a little bit. So you're going to take it and stick it on right about there. And again, I'm just kind of looking at the one that I made yesterday to try to make sure that the petal's sticking out about the same amount as the one I made yesterday. You might have to play with this to figure out what ends up looking right to you. That's okay. I don't know if I can talk while I stick my petals. Obviously not. But as you're going around, you're going to want to look from the side and try to get them at the same height. Like you can see this one is stuck a little higher. So I'm going to try to stick that one on at about the same height so they look kind of uniform from the top. Let's do an overlap right here. Okay. Now, just from the top, I'm just going to kind of press them out and down a little. And then I'm going to go on to the next size petal. I don't like this. I don't like this one. I'm just going to move this one really quick. It was sticking out a little bit taller than the rest. So now I'm moving on to the medium-sized petal, and I'm going to be sticking them wherever there's a bit of a gap. But again, actual flowers, they're not perfectly uniform, so sticking it right in the middle, you could do that if you'd like, but sticking it so it's like a little off-centered is a way to add a little bit of visual interest, to make it look a little bit more realistic. So as I'm sticking the next layer of flowers on, I'm going to stick them in the gaps, but not perfectly centered for probably most of them. And I am going to stick 5 medium-sized petals in all of the gaps. So I started with 5 for the smallest, and I'm doing 5 of the medium. I'm kind of fumbling a little bit. That's okay. I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, then I need one right here. Okay, just gonna open it up a little bit. So it's looking a little irregular. That's okay, that's kind of what I want. Now I'm going to do 2 layers of the big ones. You will see that it will look absolutely fine with just 5 of the largest ones, but I ended up wanting to make them, the flowers just a little bit more enthusiastic. And I'm kind of gently sticking it on from the side and then looking at the top, making sure the petal isn't sticking out too far before I kind of press it down a little bit more with my finger. I should keep track. Just playing wild and loose here. So that's 1. I gotta count. Oh, I'm missing one over here. Okay. So that's 5, and you can stop there, or you can just add like 1 more, like there's kind of a little bit of a gap here, so you can just add 6. that would be a totally fine place to stop. I just want to make it match the one that I made the other day. So I'm going to add some more petals. I'm just kind of looking from the top and trying to balance it out, just trying to stick petals on wherever it seems like it makes sense, just to get an overall roundish flower shape. I had to pause and actually count the number of petals, but I did eventually end with 20 petals in total, 5 of the smallest size, 5 of the medium, and then 10 of the largest size. So now when you look from the side, you've got all of these little pieces here, and you can use any kind of sort of stick tool to just kind of really, you want to really roll them down, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a blade to cut, and I want to make sure that everything above the cut is stuck to itself or stuck to something so that it doesn't fall apart. So I'm just making this base nice and stuck together. I'm also going to kind of really kind of put a bit of pressure as I'm doing this so that I can make the base a little smaller, because your flower is going to kind of have like a flat trunk, and that's okay, but it'll be a little easier to work with if it's a bit smaller. Can't quite see on this one, but the trunk of this one's a bit smaller, so I'm just going around and pressing just to squish it and make it a little smaller. Just checking to make sure it still looks good from the top and I'm not damaging anything. Okay. Okay, now that I've gotten, kind of made it a little smaller there, I'm going to take my tissue blade and I'm just going to cut straight across and drop it. It's all right. Another benefit of working with slightly firm clay, it's not going to completely get ruined if you drop it. So now this has a flat bottom, and I'm actually going to bake this. I'm not going to attach the leaves yet. I tried it multiple ways, and if you attach the leaves right now before baking, that's a totally fine way to go. I just found that I really wanted to mess around with the configuration of the leaves a little bit more, and I want to bake this so that I don't accidentally squish it. So I'm going to bake it and I'll be right back. Sorry, just really quick, a note about the baking. This clay, again, it is firm enough so that when it bakes, I'm going to put it on a tile and bake it. The petals are not really going to fall down too much as it bakes. If you've used very soft clay, as it heats up, sometimes it can kind of fall because it's not really getting much support holding the petals up. You can use cotton batting underneath the edges here. You can use anything that you can put in the oven. You can use metal, you can use wood, anything to just kind of prop the petals up so that they don't fall all the way open. But you might test and you might see that there's not really much of an issue with your clay if it's a little firmer. So while that is baking, I am going to cut out the leaves. And we make most of our debossing cutters to work with clay that's about 2.5 to 3 millimeters thick. We actually made the leaf cutters to work with clay that's closer to 1.5 millimeters thick, so that you're not adding a ton of bulk to your already pretty large earrings. So I actually did 2 layers of clay so that I could sandwich the finding in there, but I am going to cut these out of clay that is about 1.5 millimeters thick. And again, if you don't have a pasta machine, that you can use thickness guides to achieve that. You can use playing cards. On my Atlas pasta machine, I'm going to be using number 5. I also wanted to mention that we did include an outline leaf shape if you want to use thicker clay, and you can't just like press this all the way down to the cutting surface because it will be kind of messy looking. You can just press it into your clay and use it as a stamp to create those debossed lines, and then use the outline cutter to cut the rest of it out. So you can really use any thickness of clay with these two cutters together. It's either you're using this as a debossing cutter on clay that's around 1.5 millimeters thick, or you can use it as a stamp, and this is the cutter on other thicknesses of clay. So when you're deciding how you want to use these leaves, you can just use a single leaf, and that would be really pretty. You don't have to put two. You can use them overlapped, and I found that to be really pretty. I ended up for these earrings just wanting to put them kind of just like this, but I'm going to do it the other way since I'm going to make the mirror. I'm also going to cut a thin piece of clay with this outline cutter that will be the same shape as this so that I can sandwich the finding in there. I rolled this clay out to a number 7 on my Atlas pasta machine, which is just less, I think it's about 0.8 millimeters. I just want it to be thick enough to hold on to that finding without, I don't know, without ripping or feeling not secure. So now I'm going to make the mirror image of this leaf here with the finding embedded in it, and this is another situation where it makes a lot of sense to do this at the same time because it's kind of hard for me to tell how far in to put this, so I marked my finding with a little Sharpie marking so that I can ideally get my earrings about the same size. So I'm trying to make the mirror of this, but this is looking from the back. So wait, I did it the wrong way. So I just want to make sure that I get everything the right way. I want the hook. I have to do this so I can think about it. Yes, because the hook's going to go in the ear and this is going to be on the front. Great. Okay, and then this will be a mirror because that's facing that way and that's facing that way. Fantastic. I love that. You didn't need to see that. That was a little embarrassing, honestly, but when you're sticking two pieces of uncured clay together, you don't necessarily need adhesive, but I like it because I like to kind of put it over the finding, and then I prefer to use it because when you put the other piece on top and you're kind of moving it around and trying to get it perfectly placed, if you put the adhesive in between the layers, you can slide it. And if that adhesive's not there, you can't slide it into place, and you just better hope that you got it perfectly into place the first time that you laid it down, which I absolutely never do. So I'm just sliding that around, trying to get that right. And you can see I've got it on a couple pairs of tiles, just so the hook can hang down. And I'm just going to sandwich these two together as well, just so they're about the same thickness. And I'll put them just like that. And when my anemone comes out of the oven, I'll stick it right here with some adhesive and bake the whole thing again. Okay, she's out of the oven, and as predicted, not exactly identical to the one that I made yesterday, but pretty close. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to make sure that this nice flat little area has I'm gonna apply this flat area with adhesive to this spot right here. Just gonna put a pretty good amount. And then I'm gonna put this flower on here so that it doesn't really hang over this at all. It's gonna I'm gonna look from the side. Kinda right about there. Okay, now I'm going to stick this whole contraption with my 2 tiles back in the oven for a full hour so that everything has long enough to cure fully and adhere to everything, and then they're done. Here she is out of the oven and matching her little purple sister. I am really happy with how they both turned out. I also made the 3 centimeter one because I couldn't help myself. Well, actually I made a few 3 centimeter ones, but anyway. So here's the 4 centimeter and this is the 3 centimeter, and I hope you love them. If you have any questions at all about making these or forming the petals or anything along those lines, just let me know. I'm happy to answer questions. Okay, thank you. Bye.